kinds of events, gatherings, nonprofits, volunteer groups, city groups, Bible studies, weddings, receptions. 304 is now the host of the regular Tonganoxie Business Association meetings and other vital groups in our community. Grounded Coffee House is amazing as well, and in the last couple of years, they've served thousands of people who don't know anything about TUMC, know about Grounded. It's become an incredible connection between us and the community. And I'm excited to share that not only are these ministries that we've created self-sustaining themselves fully and financially, the capital campaign to pay off that building's mortgage is expected to be totally done next month. That's 6 months ahead of schedule. Isn't that awesome? That's good news. So, thank you. Just want to say thank you for your generosity in supporting a big missional idea in our community. Since coming here to serve as your pastor 4 years ago, time kind of flies by. Now I have a 2-year-old. I'm like, oh, how old am I? One of the core issues I think our church has faced is maybe a vagueness about our mission or our vision for the future in the community. When I first arrived, there was a vision team that met regularly, and in my first week here, the vision leaders, they approached me and they recommended that they just disband the group. They said, we're not getting anywhere, and so we think you should stop this and kind of find a way to make a new approach at this conversation. The thing about vision is if you can't see where you're going, it's hard to go anywhere at all. Helen Keller said, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. I like that quote. That's why in 2022, I asked our church council to form a new vision team tasked with just kind of getting an idea of where our church is at. They interviewed all of our ministry leaders, and what we found was that across the board, there was a common theme, a common desire to bring our facilities more in line with the current needs of our church's missions and ministries today. People felt that parts of our church building that are meant to serve as a tool to serve us in ministry were in many ways limiting or even preventing the success or growth of those ministries. And so after this, I think there was a kind of general idea that we needed to take another step and to go a little further down this road. And so today, this gathering is really thinking about beyond today and to begin to dream about tomorrow. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from today. It's a long-term kind of frame of mind I want to set up here. About the next generation. About the future Tonganoxie that's growing and just changing all around us. So last year we started with church council, and we took the council as well as 15 ministry leaders, and we visited Countryside United Methodist Church in Topeka, Kansas. We kind of caravanned up there, and that church had recently gone through some significant renovations of the existing church, and we just met with them to learn about the impact that it had for the people there. We learned that it helped make their facilities a lot more inviting. It helped people in the congregation grow more connected. One of the things they did was create this big fellowship space right outside the sanctuary. And they said that there's one older woman, she was in her 80s. She said, I've been going to this church my whole life, and for the first time I'm meeting people after church. It's a crazy idea. People started to stay around and in fellowship for long periods of time between the services and get to know each other. They started to grow and to have new members and new baptisms for the first time since COVID. More importantly, we learned about the process that they went through to make that happen in such a way where it maintained the DNA of the church, the values, who the church was, but also helped them take a step forward into the future. We learned how they were able to not just do it in a way where they maintained a sense of unity, but they actually strengthened the bonds of people within the church through the process. And, it really felt like a God thing because right after that visit concluded, we came back and we started to see more changes take place in Tonganoxie. We saw the new factory starting to be built and 150 new homes starting to be built and plans for more. And so we suddenly began to also see an opportunity, one, to live out our church's values of being inviting and connecting and growing and serving. As many hundreds of new neighbors will be coming to our area. And so that's why in January, our church leaders, we took another step. We hired Gordon and Brent from HTK Architects to begin to guide us in the creation of a master plan, a kind of strategic plan that would help resolve some of these questions about the vision of what are we trying to do, where are we trying to go. And so what they've done is they've helped us set up a kind of set of drafts of renovations to help us take advantage of this opportunity. Now, the plan that you're going to hear about today is intended to answer 3 questions. The first one is this: how do we bring our facilities into alignment with some of the current needs of the church? Number 2, how can we be better prepared to reach the hundreds of new neighbors in our community? And lastly, how can we position our church that's meant so much to us for years of our lives for the next generation, so they can benefit from the kind of church family that people experience here at UMC. In the Bible, there's a story of a priest named Ezra, and Ezra, he very much cared about the future, the next generation. When the exile had come to an end, Jews began to leave Babylon and to return back home to the city of Jerusalem, which at the time laid in ruin. But suddenly, for the first time in 70 years, this holy city that had just been empty was suddenly full of people. Houses are going up, it seemed like everywhere. Now, we've studied the story of Nehemiah here in worship, and Nehemiah is the one who restored the walls of Jerusalem. But not many people know the story of Ezra. But Ezra was the one who restored the people of Jerusalem. What Ezra did was he called the people to see that while all these great things had been built for the people, for themselves, houses for themselves, the house of God still laid in disrepair. It had been neglected. And he called the people to come together that they might rebuild the temple for the future. And so despite the days that they lived in, where they were up against many challenges, not only were they successful, they ended up building the temple that stood until Jesus came. Just as it was for Ezra and that generation of people, this work is about more than just today. It's about laying a foundation for tomorrow. And so today I want to introduce the main concepts of our presentation, but I want to just, again, before we get into that, invite us into a moment of prayer again. Would you pray with me? Lord, help us be mindful of all these things and how important our church is to us. We hold our church up to you, God, and say, not our will, but your will be done. And we just ask that your Spirit lead us in some of the ideas and considering some of the proposed concepts and just help us sense how you're leading us. Amen. Amen. Now, you're going to go on to hear a little bit about this, but this plan, it started with 80 church members that were involved in ministries actively right now, and they were involved in essentially focus groups. There were about 10 people in each of the groups, and they were interviewed by HTK. And so the following ideas you're going to hear about, it's not a group of small people, it's 80 people that contributed to these ideas. They put these ideas together to create the overall proposal. And so what you're also going to see is that it's very high level. It doesn't have every single detail answered. It just kind of has a general landscape of possibilities, of what ifs. And that's very intentional because there's a long process where we're going to continue to refine the vision based on finances, based on feedback from the congregation, based on continued discernment and research. And so this is just kind of the first rough draft. It's very much wet cement, as we've been saying. After you hear all of this, I also want to let you know that you're going to have the opportunity to submit full feedback in something called a feasibility study. Again, we're working with Dustin Cooper from our last campaign, and he's going to lead our congregation through this huge survey. Every church member will have the opportunity to submit a large amount of feedback about all kinds of questions to help us refine this vision. So it's very important that you participate in that study. And so if today you have a question or a concern and you don't feel like it's addressed, there is a way that we want to just ask you to take the time to fill that out, make sure we know what your concerns or questions are. I also want to let you know there's a paper you should have gotten called the Vision Case Statement. If you have that, it's been passed out to you. The projects are broken down into 3 main phases. And these phases aren't necessarily what we're going to do at a time. It's more just a chronological series of phases. So it's more of what comes first. But these projects, many of them, they can be broken down into smaller pieces, bite-sized pieces. And so I'll just get into the first one here. The first phase, it focuses on the themes of inviting and connecting. And it is primarily here on our church's first floor and entrances. The first phase is intended to transform the church experience for visitors, to provide more open and multi-use fellowship space for our congregation, and to deepen the experience of worship. Some changes that it would include are some updates to our entrances and the Welcome Center or the narthex. It would relocate Connections Cafe, which is down at the end of the hall, up to the front of the building, so it's all right here, big open space as you walk in. It would create a new inviting and safe nursery here on our first floor for young families. It would create a new small group and committee meeting room. We'd make our chapel into a more multi-use space. It would remain the chapel, but it would be better suited for other things as well. We'd update some of the sanctuary lighting so it could all be controlled from one space at the back of the room. Hopefully improve our cameras for the many people who worship online today. It's just become more of a reality. We would also make our church more ADA accessible by making some changes to the wheelchair ramp where it is and our lift as well, which can be pretty difficult to operate if you've never done it before. As well as adding a kind of outdoor plaza and some new parking options here in the front of the church, because there's all kinds of parades and big things that happen here, and we really want the front of our church to be very, very inviting and provide some space for all kinds of community activities. Through these renovations, our church would become a more inviting church to the many people who are looking for a church home or will be here in Tonganoxie. Maybe have never set foot in a church. It would also help us become more connected by having a greater fellowship space. Our narthex is a little small, and when we leave, it almost pushes you to leave. A more open space can help people remain here in community for longer as a church family. Now, depending on how extensive the church wants these renovations to be, and depending on how much at a time we take out, this first floor, if we were to do every single inch of the first floor, it could cost $1 to $2 million. Now, it's important to note that these prices, they're based on some assumptions of cost per square foot. You can see it on the document there. And some of that is negotiated when we actually are working with bids and we're actually making construction documents, which is different than the master plan. And so the prices there are different from the prices that we're going to look at on a more specific building project. Second, it's important to know that on the first floor renovations, it can be broken into smaller, more manageable pieces, and that these changes can help our church grow now for other more ambitious ideas and dreams our church may have. So through phase 1, I now want to move on to phase 2 and 3. Phase 2 and 3 focus a little bit more on growing and serving. Phase 2, to begin this project, it opens the door to expanding our missions and ministries by creating a multi-purpose facility. This multi-purpose facility could be a gymnasium, but also a larger, more open and ground-level fellowship hall, not down in our church basement. For a long time, our church, we've acquired some rental home properties, and we look at others as well. And phase 2, it seeks to answer the question, why? Why have these homes and properties in the long run? Why has God led our church to acquire these? And so the suggestion is for it to kind of open the door for these new possibilities, this kind of multi-purpose gymnasium facility. This gym, it could help us expand into children's and youth ministries that aren't down in our church basement, but they have a big room, open room that's more appropriate for the kinds of games and things they do. It could help us connect with sports teams and weeknight partnerships. How many of your kids and grandkids are just swamped with sports teams? A lot of churches, they have their kids and youth practice together. Their team is a church team, and they practice at the church, and they go and play their games. So it could connect us with our rec commission, Upward Basketball, and other associations. It could also house a new kitchen, making a more welcoming fellowship hall, because we host all kinds of people from outside our church and the community for fundraisers all the time, with the Historical Society and the UMW have done things, and the Lions Club and the PEO use our church facilities, and we want it to be very nice for all the guests that come here. And lastly, to create opportunities for new ministry. Our Good Shepherd is expanding. It's doing wonderful. There's no soup kitchen in Tonganoxie. This could be the kind of facility for all kinds of new ideas. Depending on the vision of that, a new facility in downtown here in this area, it could cost between $2 and $3 million. Again, based on the square foot cost assumption that our architects have provided. Lastly is phase 3. I'm going to get through it. I'm losing my voice. I've been preaching all day here. But it would include a small addition on the west side of the church in order to transform our preschool entrances and benefit our children's ministries. It would construct a new entrance, because our entrance is really just a stairwell, and the cinder blocks are kind of crumbling, and it's not a particularly nice experience for all of the preschool kids that attend school there. Changes to the basement would also help us expand into 2-year-old daycare and expand our preschool program, helping us connect with more families. If you were here for TEP Sunday, we make a lot of connections with families through this ministry. It would also update the rest of the church basement for new, nicer classrooms for our children's ministries. And lastly, it would seek to relocate our playgrounds. There's a lot of complaints about our pea gravel. There's cats that poop in it and other things. And it would essentially update our playground and have materials that are a little bit more modern today. And so this project could also cost $1 to $2 million using similar cost per square foot assumptions. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of money there, Pastor. That's a big vision. And you know what? That's very true. And so I just want to first alleviate any fears that we're not trying to push the church to take out some massive loan and we're just going to do all these projects and in some way jeopardize our church. It's just the first draft of a strategic plan to help us know the next step that we're to take in the vision that God is giving us. And so the goal this morning is to find what is resonating with you, our congregation, as we continue to try to work towards implementing some of these changes. And so before Gordon and Brent give you a true overview, I'm sure you want to see images and everything, let's take some time today to think about tomorrow. Let's recognize the great opportunity that we have here in Tonganoxie that a lot of other churches around Kansas, I know Methodist churches all over, their towns are just shrinking like crazy, and their churches have very little hope. UMC is very blessed. We have an amazing opportunity of just this huge mission field opening up. Also to invite you to recognize that as God's people, we are to care for God's house. And lastly, I want to just again ask you to participate in this feasibility study that'll take place in the next few weeks. Lastly, you should have a timeline. Do you have a timeline document? Can you hold it up, wave it around? If you look at the timeline document you've received, the results of the feasibility study are going to be presented to the church in July, and depending on those results, if they're positive, you kind of like the general direction of where we're going, we're going to move towards a church vote to say, yes, we want to move forward with a capital campaign towards the phase 1 projects. Okay, so it's not saying I vote to support everything about this plan. It says I want to take the next step in moving towards phase 1 projects. This campaign is going to help us know the resources available to us so HTK can draw construction documents in the new year. And so the campaign would be in the fall. We'd raise the money. We'd be applying for grants. We'd do all kinds of things to get funds. And then with a better specific budget, we can make real plans for the future. And so to just first address some of those questions, the main question we've received, how are we going to pay for this? It's through a capital campaign, through interest that we accrue, our endowment could contribute. Through grants, there's grants through our annual conference. We're working to get some of those. Also, many churches, very common, they do multiple campaigns over years. If you do a larger project at the beginning, you can plan ahead to do other campaigns to pay that off in time. And lastly, the other question was the timeline. You know, this is a 10, 20-year plan, so I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can say this is the plan for the next year and a half of how we could actually begin to see these changes made next year. And so that's what the timeline hopefully answers for you. All right, are you guys ready? Woo, there, I like that. I'm going to now invite up Gordon and Brent to share these main ideas with you. And can we welcome them, please? Thank you. I'm going to let Gordon and Brent, they're going to tell you a little bit about the story of how we got to this place and also introduce themselves. So thank you guys for being here. Yeah.
All right. Good deal. This is on. All right. Fantastic. So my name's Gordon Kimball. This is Brent Hagan. So yes, we are with HTK Architects, and I'll give you a brief little summary of who we are, where we're coming from. HTK has been around for a while, since 1958, so 66 years here. We've not been there the whole time, clearly, but over the years, our company's had the pleasure, the honor to work with a lot of different community groups, churches and schools and other clients. And so one of the things we really enjoy doing is just listening and understanding what drives you guys, what makes your spaces mean community to you. And we heard the word vision a lot. Pastor Matthew talked about, the vision for where things are going. And so we help to visualize that vision. So you're going to be seeing some renderings and some color diagrams of how we have interpreted the things that we've heard from the congregation here, from the members of TUMC, and gotten some feedback from that initially. And so I think that we've started to build some consensus with a few groups, but really wanted the opportunity to share that with you all and to hear any feedback that you might have as well. So Brent's going to get into kind of how we work through the initial steps and get to show you some of the images that might represent what this could look like. Again, these are conceptual, so they're not necessarily the final answer, but these represent ideas and concepts of things that we think could resolve, could respond to the needs that you guys have here in this place.
Hey, can you guys hear me? Perfect. So our process here began back in February. That's when we conducted those user group meetings with all your guys' different ministries. As Pastor Matthew said, there were about 10 different ministries and committees that we'd met with over 80 people. So that's where we kind of began. We got kind of two different types of feedback. We got what we call direct feedback, which was the information we received from them. And we also got indirect feedback as well. And that was just from us analyzing your guys' existing facilities and kind of reviewing what may or may not work out code-wise, what other kind of issues you guys might be facing with the facilities right now. If we could move on to the direct slide, please. So direct input, as I kind of mentioned, this was those committee the user group meetings that we met with. Once we got all that feedback, we kind of took that back and started formulating some kind of general ideas that the master plan could follow. We kind of put some ideas together and we took that back to the building vision committee. This was just to kind of double check that we were kind of going down the right path. And as we kind of got things with them kind of situated, we then met with the first impressions group to kind of formalize that we were still moving in the right direction. And that indirect input that I was talking about, so yeah, as I mentioned, that was kind of studying the existing conditions of the building, kind of what issues there are, what facility constraints that we might run into with potential projects later on down the road, looking at accessibility issues, and then also just kind of general code requirements.
So yeah, we got to crawl all over the building. We were up in the ceilings. We were looking in the elevators and the stairwells at the accessibility concerns and the restrooms, doing measurements to see if accessibility was indeed concerns in different parts of the building. So yeah, part of our process is we get to know the physical facility very well in addition to the people.
So with that, we had some preliminary findings. We had high priorities, moderate priorities, and then low priorities. So starting with the high priorities, one of the biggest things that we had heard at those user group meetings was the Connections Cafe. And just there's not enough space, kind of where it's located at in the building. Just really did not work out super well. There were a lot of issues with traffic flow, kind of getting back to that space, getting back, and then other issues with kind of the narthex gathering space out here, just being tight, not being super welcoming, and kind of, as Pastor Matthew mentioned, kind of forces you kind of back outside after service. Another thing, so expanding the circulation with that. Another focus was communal gathering space. The space downstairs is kind of limiting. The ceiling height is pretty small. Kind of getting to that location is kind of challenging. So those were some issues that we heard there. And then kind of just better accessibility for the facility and creating spaces that were more welcoming and inviting to kind of help your guys' church grow as the city does as well. Getting into the moderate priorities, a couple things there. So lighting and AV in this space, but also the chapel, making sure that chapel is a little bit more usable for a multitude of uses with that better lighting. Expanding the youth spaces, both the youth ministry and then also TEP as well. Creating a kind of a new nursery space that was a little bit more dedicated to that. Right now it's kind of used in tandem with your guys' kind of main meeting room. So kind of separating those out so both of those functions can kind of have its own space that's a little bit more usable for those. And then also kind of a new playground surfacing out there to kind of help with the cat issues. And then moving down a little bit to the lower priorities. So still priorities that had focus, but some of these are either a little bit lower cost items or kind of some of these other priorities had more need. So with that, a new play field or the potential of a play field, new finishes up here in the sanctuary, especially here on the back wall, new signage for the facility, and installing kind of new, more thermally broken windows to help kind of with heating and air conditioning in here. So with that, we'd preserve these stained glass windows in here and creating and installing new windows that would also help protect those windows as well, like in the event of a hailstorm or something like that, and installing window shades as well.
And we took a look at the grounded coffee house as well, just to do a quick pass through and understand that there were some things that could be improved and kind of have some things in mind that would help to maximize the use of that space.
So getting into the facility issues that we kind of discovered and also heard about, there's been moisture issues that I've heard has kind of plagued you guys. It sounds like it's mostly handled now, but just making sure that that's fully done and taken care of, especially down in the basement where there's not as much airflow down there. Sound transmission, especially from this space down to the hall downstairs, you can't really have things at the same time because of that sound bleed. The lift out there is slow moving, so kind of updating that to kind of help make that a little bit more user-friendly. And then the electrical circuits that you guys have throughout the building are a little bit taxed, especially like on the Connection Cafe, when you guys have like quite a few crock pots and other kind of electrical demand going. So those are just a few of the facility issues that we kind of found as we analyzed your guys' existing church. So with that, we kind of moved on and started to formulate a master plan that we had took back to the Building Vision Committee. So with that, this first plan is going to be just kind of an overall site plan. We were asked to kind of, if the entire block here, if you guys were able to develop it in the future, what could that look like? So we kind of took a look at that high level, seeing if we use the whole block, what all we could do with that. So as Pastor Matthew kind of laid out, we have kind of 4 different main phases. We got phase 1 that focuses here on the upper level, so that's going to be your spaces up in blue. The darker colors are going to be your additions, and then the lighter colors are going to be renovation kind of associated with that phase. So that dark blue is going to be an addition out front here on 4th Street, and then that light blue color is going to be renovations up here on the upper level. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 would be that multi-purpose addition back here on the south side of the site. That would house that multi-purpose functions for larger community events. And then coming in that orange color, that'd be phase 3. So that would be that addition here on the west side of the site and renovations to the lower level. And then lastly, there was kind of a phase 4, kind of as needed, so just renovations to 304, just kind of as the uses kind of evolve over in that space. And then also, just real quick, since we're on the site plan, with that phase 2, that multi-purpose addition or multi-purpose facility, kind of expanding to the west along that site, there's expanded parking, and then also an addition to a new playground and playfield on that southwest corner. So moving on to phase 1 now. So as I mentioned, that dark blue area, that's going to be an addition. So that new addition is kind of out front of the facility here. That would create a new entry space into the building up here coming off 4th Street. With that, there would be a ramp that runs kind of through the bell tower that you guys have out there. So you'd be kind of walking underneath and through that in a new kind of addition out there. And with that new ramp, that kind of pulls your guys' existing ramp out here outside of the narthex to free that space up and create a new ADA accessible ramp out there on the north side. So with that, as you come up that ramp, you actually kind of turn the corner into a new larger gathering area where that existing meeting space is and offices. So increasing that area there to allow for the new Connections Cafe, expanding that so it's a more larger gathering area that's closer to that main narthex area, so that way there's kind of more openness, so that way you can focus on kind of gathering after church or before church. And then as you kind of move down further towards the west, outside of that gathering area, that the meeting space would also be used in your guys' existing chapel. So with that new lighting would kind of help allow for that space to be used for different purposes, especially for meetings. And then Pastor Matthew's current office would become the new office space for the ministries down on the, where his current office is. With that, going on to the south side of the corridor now, we'd actually kind of expand that corridor there so it's a little bit more welcoming. So right now it's pretty small. I think it's only about like 5 feet or so. So kind of shifting that wall further south so that way as you kind of move back to that area, it's a little bit more welcoming as you move down there. So starting off on the very southwest corner, you have Pastor Matthew's new office back there. Since we're kind of removing some of that storage space that is off of that corridor, there'd be a new storage closet there, a little bit larger so that we can store more things within that space. And then directly across from the chapel/meeting room, there would be a new nursery. That space there could have a large amount of glass kind of off that corridor, just to allow for transparency kind of in and out. So if the parents are outside in that gathering area, they can still kind of see in to see what's going on in the nursery, so they can just kind of supervise their children as they're in there. Moving outside of that, there's new restrooms. So instead of having the 2 restrooms up here, you would now have 4. 2 of those would be ADA accessible, and then as you move closer towards that narthex area, there would be kind of a lounge seating directly across from that gathering area. So something that would have some more soft seating, maybe some couches, some coffee tables, just to kind of allow for more of a lounge area that people can kind of connect a little bit more and have more kind of private conversations outside of that main gathering area.
So the primary focus of phase one was to really address the welcoming and the gathering and the connection of community right inside that front door. So as you enter the space, knowing exactly where you need to be going, having some visual connection. It feels very closed right now, but just to give you some spatial awareness of where things are in the building so you can see where people are gathering, you know how to get there. And the narthex being as wide as it can be possible physically, but then allowing some penetration of that brick wall so you can see through as well. You can see who's coming in, people coming in can see where everyone's gathering and draw to each other. So that kind of was the genesis of the proposed solution, was to address that primary need of how do we connect with the people that are coming in the door and be the best neighbors to them that we can be.
And then lastly, also with that phase one, we would look at kind of new finishes in here, new lighting, as I kind of previously mentioned, and kind of updated finishes back here on the rear wall of the sanctuary. So with that, phase one would cost somewhere between, as it's shown right now, 1.8 to 2.2. As we kind of move through that the feasibility study, that will kind of really narrow down kind of what that scope can be, and then we'll kind of further narrow that down as we move into the actual construction document phase and things kind of get more focused in. So moving on to the next slide. So I'm actually going to jump around a little bit. So the blue was phase one. I'm actually going to jump over phase two now, which is that multi-purpose facility on the south side of the site. I'm actually going to jump over to phase three now, just to kind of keep inside of the building. So after phase two happens, that kind of allows for some things to shift around inside of the building to allow for phase three to happen. So phase three is that area in the orange to the west side of the site that would create that new entry for TEP, that lower level, making it feel more welcoming and inviting. Then also up here on the second floor, that addition would be 2 levels. That would allow for additional meeting rooms or offices up on the second level. And then with that, a new kind of elevator could be installed with that, 3-stop elevator, so that way you can hit all 3 of those, or all the different levels on the over there on the TEP side and the upper level, kind of where there's that 2-foot offset.
Yeah, that would also provide a great entry opportunity for the office throughout the week as well, because the proximity of that entrance on the south side aligns right with the new opportunity for parking, which would be somewhat centralized in the site at that point. So you wouldn't be wandering around down an alley looking for the entrance. It would be something clearly annotated as a place to go if you're looking for that office access throughout the week, or the entrance to the TEP, which Brent mentioned would be much wider and more inviting and accessible with an elevator, a nice, modern, safe elevator that would get you to all the different floors.
So that was primarily the addition part. So moving on to the kind of the lower level, the rest of that phase would be renovating that lower level to expand the TEP spaces. So instead of having 1 classroom, there'd be 2. They'd have their own restrooms kind of integrated with that to allow for better supervision. And then that would also kind of reshuffle some things around down there. The youth could then kind of take over the current hall so that they have a larger space, kind of have a kitchen that's a little bit more dedicated and personal to them. And then also expanding upon the elementary kind of age ministry classroom space down there. So taking those 2 smaller classrooms and making them 1 larger classroom that's a little bit more usable. And then also some kind of a new lift down there to kind of help traverse that those 2 steps down there to allow for that. Then some new restrooms down there as well, updating those to be ADA accessible. So going on to kind of what this might look like in 3D. So the picture I have up here shown actually has both phase 1 and phase 3 shown. So there's kind of an arrow you can see. Phase 3 would be that area off to the west side. That could look something kind of similar to how the existing building looks like on that side. But if you look over to where the bell tower is, that new kind of addition on the north side there, it could be something where there's a nice kind of overhang over that entry that would kind of help encourage people to kind of gather and kind of stick around outside, especially on a nice day. So it's kind of expanding that narthex gathering area out to the north side and creating a nice little plaza area out there to the front. With that, there could be some additional kind of seating off to the kind of east side of the plaza with maybe like a nice little kind of donor plaza area or a founder's kind of foundation that could have like donor names carved into some bricks there, creating a nice little space there. This next slide, I've got some interior views of what that phase 1. I think we might have jumped a slide. Can we go back to? No, go forward one.
Might have left one out.
Oh, there isn't? Okay.
We'll catch it later.
Okay. If not, we've got a board outside in the narthex area to take a look at those. So phase 2, the red one, this is what that multi-purpose building could look like. So there's still a lot of flexibility on kind of what this area is. As Pastor Matthew mentioned, this could be kind of a larger gymnasium space to allow for the expansion of like a sports ministry. It could help facilitate larger banquets and events within the community here. And then also with that, there could be a kitchen, a meeting room, and then kind of restrooms and other support spaces to kind of help support that new multi-purpose facility.
Yeah, the idea being that that could function on its own. So the church could be completely closed in the evening, and a team or a group could come and use this building and be self-contained within that and not need to get back and forth into the church proper.
So moving on to the next, so just aerial view of this space. So this is still just pretty kind of rough kind of rendering of what it could look like. It could look completely different than this. So just for scale-wise, on the south side of the site, that facility would look something to that size and nature. So a little bit larger facility just to allow for kind of those basketball games to happen. And then that space could also have nice amounts of glass to kind of allow for some daylight within that space. Materials would probably look something similar to what we have here on the church, but as far as the overall appearance, it could still vary drastically from what we've got shown here. And so that'd be phase 2, and you can kind of see there on the back side, phase 3 is just kind of poking out for that new entry, which if we move on to the next slide, we've kind of got that shown a little bit better. So that area in between that phase 2 and phase 3 area, that'd be that new parking lot area. So you have some nice parking area close to that multi-purpose addition and also close in proximity to that phase 3 addition to allow for kind of better access into the church from that parking lot. And then just to kind of recap again real quick, so that area in blue, that'd be that phase 1. Phase 2 would be that area, the red area, that multi-purpose addition that's on the southeast side of the site. With that phase 2, we would have the expanded parking lot areas and the play field and playgrounds to the very kind of southwest corner of the block. Phase 3 would come in with that orange color with the addition to the west side and the renovations to the lower level, and then potential phase 4 for kind of modifications to 304.
So this is a conversation, so we've done all the talking so far. So we'd also just like to hear from you guys as to what your thoughts, what your questions might be about these things. We're here and available this morning. Pastor Matthew as well can kind of field things from his side of the room. And I don't know how you want to accommodate that or moderate it, but we're here for you.
Sure. So can I have a vision team volunteer? Is Donna in here? Where are you? There you are. I think we're going to have one person. You can walk around holding the microphone for questions, and then you also got a 3x5 card. If you're really uncomfortable asking the question, you're afraid, I don't know, to speak in front of everybody, you can write the question on that, and then someone will also pick that up, and we can answer those questions in a written form. And so can I grab one of your microphones? Can I get a volunteer, Landon, or one of you? There's a question.
Hi, I have a question. Has there been any sort of not church but community leadership involvement, just as far as what the community is needing or wanting? Does the community want or need a basketball place? Does the community want or need a soup kitchen? That kind of thing.
That's mostly based on the user group meetings. So, people in our church we're a part of the community, and everyone's lives just revolve around that. And very often we're in competition with sports. There's probably a big tournament today. There's probably a whatever today. Well, we can either be like, we're just the victims of that, or we can lean into that and embrace the whole sports thing that rules kids' lives today. It's just a reality of it, and say, well, we're gonna do that ourselves. We're gonna be the host for this community life. And so, not necessarily. We did have Brad Eccles, who is the director of the rec center on our building vision team, to help us talk about the growing needs for sports complexes, and he kind of weighed in on how helpful that would be. Also for large fellowship gatherings, so it's partly for big kicking a ball around for youth or whatever, or a ball game, but it's also for a larger space for our fellowship dinners, because it can get a little tight down there for any kind of reception. It gets a little congested, and it's also hard to access. And so it's intended to be multi-purpose and not just for one. If the sports thing isn't really what the church desires, but we still want a larger fellowship space, it can look very different than it is. So that's just kind of where they were coming from.
I've got a couple questions. Number one, as the church grows, you're probably going to have a choir. Have we made room for a choir?
The chapel is a great space for them to practice. They could come in here. There's nothing preventing, I don't think, the chapel. There is a big storage room down at the end of the hallway that could house robes. We currently have them in a closet, if that's what your question is. It about like a place for them to practice, or?
No, up here on the stage.
I don't know what that would necessarily entail. You mean like a choir loft?
No.
That hasn't been necessarily a part of the conversation, but thanks for bringing it up. Do you want to sing in the choir?
The man there will guide him.
Oh, right. I think that we have a wonderful choir that's kind of being rebuilt. A lot of our choir members passed away, and after COVID, there really wasn't one anymore. And so we've just been doing it for special Sundays. Christmas Eve, we had a wonderful, wonderful choir. So hopefully that there's more of a need and desire for that. We also have a bell choir. We have all the stuff for a bell choir. The only thing that's holding us back is getting someone to lead it. I mean, it's really that simple. So hopefully growing, we could have a choir director that's really passionate about that. They could volunteer. We used to have a volunteer who did it every Sunday or monthly. I don't know. It was pre-me. But yeah, there's nothing holding that back. I think we would set up the stage differently for a choir. But thanks for bringing it up. I don't think it's in the current plan, though.
And the second, and probably one of the most important things that hasn't been mentioned, is to make sure Pastor Matthew is here to guide us through all three phases.
It's very kind of you to say. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. That makes me feel very good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I might have missed it, but what about the back entrance? Is that going to change?
Yes, it would change a little bit. So with that kind of phase one, we had a new lift going in there. That lift would also be like a 3-stop lift. So that way, if someone's coming in the rear entry, like in a wheelchair, or can't really quite make the stairs as easily as they used to, they'd be able to get on that lift at that point and go up to the upper level. And then kind of also with that phase one, some new finishes throughout that narthex area would also kind of spill into that rear entry as well.
I think in that back entrance, we would also connect a strip of sidewalk to the door, to the sidewalk along the building. Currently, there's just a parking space in the way, but the current vision would also add a little sidewalk there so you can walk from your car on the sidewalk all the way to the back door, which you currently can't. You kind of got to weave through people's cars. And so some practical updates like that, too.
Well, I was just thinking with the parking back there'll be more parking, and some people can't walk the stairs, so that's what I was thinking.
Correct, we do. So in that phase one, yeah, we actually have true ADA parking out front to allow for that.
Limited now to how much parking spaces are there.
The goal would be to expand the number of spaces that could be there. The goal would be to expand the number of spaces that's out there now. We would have more handicap parking out front.
Yeah, there would be a kind of big plaza with some drive-up spots where it would essentially be, there would be no curb. They'd drive up and they'd be able to just walk without getting over curb on the front. And then, like he said, in the back, the lift will go to that level of that door, and so it'll be a 3-stop lift with a door either side of the lift, if that makes sense. So it should be ADA accessible from every vantage point.
I couldn't really see in the diagrams, but are there going to be classrooms for like adult Sunday school? And there was a lot of things for the youth downstairs, but what about expanding our adult Sunday schools?
I think so that meeting room, so like the existing chapel, for my understanding, that would be kind of where that functions out of. So kind of taking that chapel and making it more usable throughout multiple kind of different purposes, increasing its utilization rate, essentially. So I think that's kind of my impression of where that would happen.
I think our idea is that it'd be a little more like the multi-use space at the library, where a big screen can disappear or it can come down. You could have tables and chairs that would fold up and go away, but then you can bring them out for committee meetings or small group meetings in a circle, and you'd have different kinds of screens and tech abilities for those groups. But also the various, it is a little hard to see on these screens, but in this first floor open space, this kind of lounge area and different kind of tabled, standing, sitting. There'd be different places to meet. If you're meeting throughout the week and no one else is in the building, you'd have a lot of options to choose from, essentially, yeah. But there would be an adult meeting space, yeah.
I have several concerns, and it brings up the chapel. I just think we need to keep the integrity of the chapel. That's me. I think that that's an intimate place. I think I think it's a very special place. We need the sanctuary, but that chapel is very special also. First of all, if you're talking about parking, I assume you're talking about knocking down a couple of houses that the church owns, and we have at least one family in this church who lives in one of those church houses, and I would hope that you would give them a heads up. You know, you're going to have to move somewhere because we are going to knock your house down.
Hey, Kathy, could I answer each question as you go? Yes. So with the houses, yes, they're both. I think both of those people are here. So this isn't a plan where tomorrow we're doing this. You know, this phase 2 could be many years down the line, and so it's not really intended to say this is happening right now. We're kicking you out. It's to get the groundwork for what would we do if we did want to make those changes. And so there would definitely be a lot of conversation around how to do that very properly and not to catch anyone off guard. You know what I mean? So absolutely, that's a conversation that they've been having.
Okay.
Technically, we owned 3 lots. And then there's 2 more that we do not own currently. This is assuming we acquired those homes and eventually paid them off and demolished them too. So long term.
304 was mentioned, and I know I spoke of this in our groups. The acoustics in that place are horrid. I think it's a beautiful place, and it's an old place, and there again, I think we need to conserve the integrity of that. But I hear we want to update 304, but I haven't heard the word acoustics in that.
I think that was a concern raised. We just, that's not particularly urgent. I mean, we really want to focus on phase 1 because that's what we would raise money for towards in the fall, to be honest. So that there are projects that they have. We just aren't intending to spend a lot of time on that today.
Well, our Bible study met over there the other day, and I had someone say to me, I don't know how many times I'm going to come because I just can't hear. And that was just 8 of us or less sitting at a table. Of course, the elevator's on there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think I call it a freight elevator. I can't imagine the people who have to use that thing, and it's just like you're on a cart or something, you know. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we often have funerals where I'll have 4 or 5 people in a wheelchair needing to use that, and you have to hold it physically to get it down, and it goes very slowly. So instead of being with the family, you know, I'm standing there holding the button, and it's scary, and it's only painted so far as you can see, and then it becomes, what's the ride that you called it? The house, you know, there's this ride, there's an elevator ride. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Point is, it gets a little scary, and people have gotten trapped in there since I've been here as the pastor. So it is certainly something that we should try to update. And there are lifts that are much more affordable than a true elevator, but it'd be glass, it'd be clean and look nice.
Good.
The whole thing.
Being a person who believes that green stuff keeps us alive, I'm concerned about the flowers and shrubs in front of the building. I would like to see some, I can't think of what it's called, but anyway, some green stuff around the church.
Okay.
And not to destroy everything.
Hey, Kathy, there are others with questions, so.
Okay,
if
well,
you have
one real
more-
quick comment. And I don't know how to say this without stepping on toes, but we don't currently have an executive assistant because we don't have the money for an executive assistant. And I think that it's very, very imperative that we have someone in the front office at this church. We're talking about millions of dollars to do something to the facilities, and yet we can't afford to pay and to give benefits or whatever goes with that to an executive assistant. Amen.
All right. In the back, there's one.
There's a Kaylee there in the back left, Landon,
I'll come back.
if you want to. Okay.
So, my main question is just for clarification. The parking out front would be getting rid of a lot of that lawn space and making the diagonal parking there, correct?
It could.
It would take a little bit away. It would essentially bump that sidewalk forward roughly 6 feet or so. So it would take away a little bit of that. But we do we have a new kind of planting bed along that north side as well that would kind of help introduce some more kind of green space back into that area, along with kind of redoing this planter out here a little bit as well.
So you're changing the parallel parking to full-in parking. That helps clarify.
Correct, yeah.
Because you're trying to figure out how you're making more parallel parking spaces, and that's not gonna happen. So you make it full-in spaces.
Yeah.
And then move the sidewalk back, correct?
Correct, yeah, and parallel parking spots are kind of pretty tricky to make truly ADA compliant. So usually you want to try to switch to an angle stall. That kind of also helps increase the number that you can get in there as well. So I think, I don't remember how many are out there right now. I think maybe 5 stalls, maybe 4. But we would basically have 6 angled stalls, and then there'd still be 2 angled stalls or parallel stalls left. So it'd bring that total to 8 out there.
Oh, go ahead, Bear.
My other question was, which phase was the insulating the windows?
That would be phase 1.
Okay, because it gets really hot back here during the summer because there's no fans, and with any over there, just doesn't work.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Well, my question, I don't believe has been addressed as a welcoming for new members to our church. And I think our goal is to be inviting, especially with the new people coming into the community. And I don't recall your saying what improvements will be made in the sanctuary besides the lighting and something about the wall. So to me, it seems like it's a beautiful ceiling, it's a beautiful room, but is there a more creative way that we could at least paint and at least maybe make our sanctuary more beautiful? An artistic view is what I'm looking
so
at.
we have accounted for that in phase 1. We don't have all like the specifics and details of it. That we'll actually get into once we move into the documentation of phase 1, which that'll happen starting in kind of next December, January time. That's when we're going to start to really get into those specific details. But yeah, we did account for kind of new finishes, kind of renovating the sanctuary up here. That could account for increased area up here for either a choir up here or maybe down here in front. And new finishes, yeah, mainly back here, but it could also include kind of painting the walls in here to kind of create something a little bit nicer. I mean, it's still a very beautiful sanctuary right now, but that's something we can definitely look into.
There's some old architecture that we'd probably update. Like, these are some old speaker boxes. There aren't actually speakers up there anymore. We just have different technology today. So they're just, and like that speaker up there, we would remove some of the things that aren't actually used anymore. And so we'd have a team that can get up there to do all of that, essentially. So.
And there was one thing I did not touch on just because we didn't have the interior images kind of shown up here. But part of that kind of that welcoming entrance, we would have a welcoming kiosk that's kind of right outside here. So something that's a little bit more built in that someone can kind of man before service starts. And could also potentially be kind of more of a front office area, kind of depending on how things kind of shake out here in the future.
So it was hard to see on that, but there would be a small, like essentially a desk area, a kiosk, a built-in counter where the person sitting in the front office would be able to see both entrances visually and just have a little more control. Though the office with all the paper and the printer would be down the hall, there would be a welcome desk hospitality person visible on Sunday mornings for sign-ups as opposed to setting up a table or whatever. So we'd do it a little different. Yeah. I just want to say we're after noon. I don't know, my stomach is rumbling a little bit. So are there any final questions, any last important things that you just really want clarification on? Shane.
So would it be possible, as you look at the all-church vote in July, of whether phase 1 or potentially even different phase, such as phase 3, would go first?
So if you look at the timeline, thank you for bringing this up. I don't have a copy with me, but the vote is really about, to answer your question, you give feedback like, hey, I care more about phase 3 than phase 2 in the study that's going to happen in June. So I think next week you'll be emailed a link with an online, it's 10 questions, but they're really, really helpful questions where you're going to share what you think. You can also, it has one question that's like, what do you want to say? You can put in any concern you have, but we're not really getting into phase 3 right now. And so say we do phase 1. Say it takes 5 years or 6 years to do phase 1. Well, it's pretty far down whether we choose between phase 2 or 3. But at each time, we'll come back to the master plan and say, well, how's the church led us, or how's God been leading us? Do we want to make changes to this? And so it's a working document that we constantly alter. It's wet cement, it's clay that we're changing over time. And so we could in 3 years decide that phase 2 concept, it's just really not what we wanted to do, and we'd rather do something different. That's totally okay. But the July vote, assuming the results say, we think this is a good idea to start with phase 1, which we identified, that was the main theme that we heard in the 80 people that were interviewed. That's why it's phase 1. Seemed like everyone had something to say about that, all kind of aligning in the same way. That vote is really around, do I want to do that sooner than later? Do I want to move forward with a campaign to start raising funds? And so that's what that vote is about. And then there's a vote in the new year over specifics. What's going over the windows, what's not. It's going to be very, very detailed at that time where those questions and concerns, because we'll be looking at materials. A light fixture can cost a lot or a little, and so they'll be making those decisions over time. So to make a change to the master plan, I would just submit that concern in the feasibility study, that's important to you. And if there's a lot of you that feel that way, put that in the feasibility study, and we'll say, okay, we're going to switch those 2 phase ideas. That's fine, because it's a long-term document. In 3 years, that perspective could change, and that's okay. The point is just to have something that says, what's next? That's what's really important. I think there's been times that the church almost acted, but decided not to, because they said, well, what if we want to do that? Well, what if we want to do this instead? And so I think maybe at times missed an opportunity. But this will answer those questions, clarify, and have us be able to say yes or no, we want to do this or that, and help us continue to have a sense of momentum in the church, which is important. So yeah, did that answer the question, Shane? Thank you. Okay. Can we thank Gordon and Brent? Yeah. Any last things you want to say? You're good? Brent, thank you so much. So this is going to be emailed out to you. You're going to be able to see a lot better all the details. Also out here in the narthex are all of those posters, so you can take a lot more time. You can take a picture with your phone, doesn't matter. But it's going to be emailed to you with, there was a couple slides that showed what it would look like with a lot of this brick wall missing and with it set up with Connections Cafe here. It's a really great kind of image. I find it to be very exciting, so take a look at that when we send it out. And I'm going to bless the food. How's that sound? Does that sound good? All right, let's pray. Lord God, I thank you for this day of Pentecost, for your Holy Spirit helping us discern. Give us peace about our church. We give it to you. It's your church. And so, Lord, do with it what you will and help us have the faith to follow. And so, God, we thank you. Bless the food, the hands that have prepared it in our potluck time together as a church. Amen. Amen. Thank you again, HTK. Appreciate you guys. And they'll be around to answer questions if you want to talk to them. Also, Landon is here from the Vision team. He can answer